Welcome to the big picture. The economic survey of the year 2012-13 was laid in the parliament today. The survey paints a picture of hope on the growth front after admitting that the year gone by will be recording the lowest growth rate in the last several years. The survey talks of prioritizing expenditure to bridge fiscal deficit and raises alarm about the increasing subsidies bill and need for reducing it. The international situation, which is seen as partly responsible for the slowing growth rate, however, is seen to be on the recovery path in the next year, which will have an impact on the Indian economy too. The lower tax revenues than expected, the rising oil bills and the need to increase diesel and kerosene prices and the widening trade and current account deficit are all seen as matters of concern. With Finance Minister P. Chidambaram slated to present the general budget tomorrow, what are the signals from this economic survey he would have picked up? How will he be able to tackle the concerns expressed in the survey? We will look at all this today while discussing what the survey indicates and foretells for the future. To discuss this, I have with me Mohan Guruswamy, an economist and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, the well-known columnist and economic analyst, Biraj Patnaik, principal advisor to the Commissioners of Supreme Court on Right to Vote, and Professor Pravin of the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU. Welcome to all of you. Mohan, coming to you first. The survey says that, presents a bleak picture of what has happened in this year, but, has a hope for the coming year. It says that the economic downturn is now over and the recovery path has started. Do you think what the survey says, it has some validity?
Well, if the survey is talking about the global recovery,
right?
I think that is
it also talks about the Indian recovery.
It's still iffy.
Yes.
Okay. Because Europe is not picking up. As far as the Indian economy is concerned, if you want to pick up, then you have to make huge capital expenditures. You have to get off the subsidy bandwagon and get on.
This year the growth rate is supposed to come down around 5%, but it talks of a 6.1 to 6.7 growth in the next year.
It's possible. We've done those kind of growth rates before. All you need to do is to step up expenditure on capital investment rather than step up expenditure on subsidies and giveaways. So you can get economic multiplier effects out of it. I think if the government spending on itself also has to come down, and I think some money should be made available from disinvestment and making public sector more productive by disentangling it from government. So a lot of these things can be done, and you can get back on the growth path. Picking up 1%, 1.5% in a year has been done before.
Okay. Paranjoy?
My view is a little different. There's a huge range between 6.1% and 6.7%.
Right.
When the chief economic advisor, Dr. Raghuram Rajan, was asked why this huge range,
absolutely.
He said it's because the uncertainty that exists in the economic environment, in the external economic environment.
Exactly.
That's the word. Then I go along with what Mohan said. The revival of the American economy, the uncertainty as far as Europe is concerned, all of it makes it like, whether the current account deficit, which is what the economic survey has also focused a lot on, how that would be, reduced from, say, about 5% of GDP to 2.5% of GDP, only time can tell. Having said that, all economic surveys tend to be on the optimistic side, and that's because it's prepared by
the government,
the Ministry of Finance. Right. These individuals are paid to be optimistic, so even when the situation is looking very bad, they'll always say, look, tomorrow promises, and day after promises to be much, much better. So having said that, I also want to say that what is interesting in this particular economic survey is, for the first time, there's a 27-page chapter which is focusing on jobs.
Right.
The earlier economic survey dismissed this whole issue of jobs and employment in just a few paragraphs. At least an attempt has been made to focus on jobs, and one may or may not agree with the prescriptions and the conclusions but as Dr. Rajan himself pointed out during his press conference, these are issues that need to be debated, because this whole issue is the Indian economy has been growing, and in some years it's grown very well. But have we seen the kind of job creation that is required? When you talk about inclusive growth, as he himself points out, the best kind of inclusive growth is jobs. If a person has a good job, a decent job.
And as far as jobs are concerned, we have had a report recently saying that the last few years there's been a jobless growth virtually.
I mean,
That would be wrong to say that. You had jobless growth in the organized sector.
Right.
The unorganized sector is still growing because you're creating jobs out there.
But how secure are those jobs?
They're not secure. They're not secure at all. But that is in the nature of our labor laws, which has created a vested interest in creating, jobs in the unorganized sector.
Anyway, Pravin Jha, the jobs is one of the major things which has been talked about. Jobs, and the survey talks about increasing the jobs in the agriculture sector. And agriculture sector, as far as this survey shows, has not done as well as it should have done.
If you just go by the basic numbers, for instance, look at, let's say, 2004-05 and 2009-10 and compare that with the earlier period, 99-2000, 2004-05,
right,
and look at the employment elasticity of growth in different sectors.
Right.
In fact, both in agriculture and in industry, these have turned negative.
Right.
So I think Mohan's optimism about growth is quite misplaced. If anything, it's in the services sector that there has been a very small kind of positive elasticity, but there too, the dip is really remarkable. From sort of annual elasticity of employment growth rate, the first period, that's 99-2000, 2004-05, it was 0.44. It has come down to about 0.04.
Right.
So you can imagine, what the situation is. So on the job front, I think the situation is truly dismal.
Right.
And I do not know if the government is even thinking about a strategy where we can make a small dent on the problem. Forget about, sort of making a major turnaround or something like that. But in terms of the simple numbers, we are talking of a quinquennium which gave us the highest GDP growth rate since independence for a 5-year period.
Right.
And the same period has no jobs. So what are we going to do in terms of our ideals of inclusive growth and employment generation and so on?
Right.
So I think that's total mess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Paranjoy.
I
makes a very important point. We have had this high growth rate, but the jobs.
I asked this question today to the senior economists in the Ministry of Finance. And I said there is a study by the Institute of Applied Manpower Research which is indicating that during the period between 2005 and 2010, when the economy was growing very fast at 9%, 9.5%, why is it that there was not a commensurate increase in jobs? So they said no, the NSS data showed that in terms of participation rates, we haven't done badly. But I think even the survey concedes...
What is participation rate?
That means the number of people who offer themselves for job and the number of people who actually get jobs, and that was a high 97% according to the data. But what I think the economic survey itself concedes is the quality of jobs that were created.
Absolutely.
Those who left agriculture, they got very, very uncertain jobs in construction with no benefits, with no social security.
In fact, the survey talks about more and more jobs
only
in the construction sector.
So as what Dr. Pravin Jha himself says, the issue is the kind of employment you're creating, and despite the economy growing at a fast pace, then you are not able to create durable, decent jobs. Now, whatever may be the reason, the economists, Dr. Rajan and all say it's largely because the labor laws are too rigid and they protect a small section of the organized workforce, which also Mohan is arguing. But I think the issues go a little deeper. The whole issue is, one is the kind of capital intensity of the way we are growing. And the sad part of the story, and this is really the bad part of the story too, the sad and the bad part of the story, is that if this was indeed the situation when the economy was growing at 9.5%, imagine what is the situation at present when the rate of growth has slowed down.
Mohan, formal jobs in manufacturing sector. This is something which has taken a hit. During this 9.5% growth rate also, manufacturing sector, it should have given more jobs. Why is it not?
You can see take Maruti as an example. You have people doing the same work. One guy gets 30,000 rupees and the other guy gets 12,000 rupees.
Yes.
Because the guy who gets 30,000 rupees, he's got all the paraphernalia protection. And so productivity is low also. The guy who gets 12,000, he's got all the uncertainties of life. He's just come off.
No, but what's the point?
No, the point is you've got jobs in the unorganized sector growing. Because, the organized sector has now become a big plantation, an enclave, where, it's very difficult to break through. It's very expensive, very high cost. If you take the organized sector by itself, the labor costs exceed that of China. Okay.
Anyway, we will.
Girish, may I
yes,
make a small
yes,
point?
Yes, Pravin, quickly.
You see, even if you look at the workforce, total workforce, 2004-5, it was 457.5 million. 2009-10, it's 459 million.
Right.
Right? Just an increase of 1.5 million.
Right.
So jobs are not being created anywhere. Period. Full stop.
Okay.
So, saying that in the unorganized sector, lots of jobs are being created, that's just not true as per the NSS data.
So the survey, the optimism which is displayed in the survey, are hoping that there will be, we'll have to take it to the pinch of salt.
Look at it on a 5-6 year trend here. You actually added up jobs at about 7-8 million a year.
Anyway, this is a debatable issue which will continue to be debated, but as Paranjoy was rightly pointing out, the Institute of Applied Manpower Research, a wing of the Planning Commission itself, paints a very gloomy picture as far as jobs are concerned. Anyway, let us shift from jobs to agriculture. Biraj, Patnaik, agriculture sector has not done. You have been a campaigner for right to food. When you talk of right to food security and things like that, agriculture has to grow. But do you see any such hopes in this survey, and do you think the finance minister will be able to do something about it in his budget tomorrow?
No, I am expecting the finance minister to make an announcement on agriculture, particularly with regard to loans to producer organizations. But that apart, I think what the economic survey is doing is acknowledging two things. One, it's acknowledging the fact that growth in itself is not inclusive, which government has been saying, and that we've not been able to achieve this mirage of inclusive growth. And second, that the growth that we've achieved is jobless. If you look at the basis of these conclusions that the economic surveys draws for the agriculture sector, that becomes even more worrying.
Yes.
Because one of their conclusions is that the reason for low growth of jobs in agriculture is because the small farm is unviable and we've not allowed to let it die.
Right.
Now, that I'm quite amazed by the fact that the economic survey says this, because 80% of land holding in India is less than 2 hectares. 80% of our farmers are either small or marginal farmers.
Right.
Now, this cannot be a conclusion that can be drawn on the basis of these figures, and I think that's very, very worrying. Second, what also worries me that the approach to the social sector of the economic survey focuses on outlays. Time and again, government has spoken about the need to move from outlays to outcomes. But if you read the entire human development chapter, the entire chapter is just a recording of what was the budget last year, how much was spent, and what is the budgetary projection in the 12th plan.
Right.
So I think the message for the social sectors, insofar as this economic survey is concerned, is very clear. Expect significant cuts, and the increases, yes, absolutely, and the increases that you will see for health, for education, for other social sector programs will not even cover for inflation. I think that is the message that is coming out from the economic survey.
Yes. Okay. We need to go into a short break now, but there are several other issues which needs to be discussed. We'll come back very soon and continue the discussion. Please keep watching. Welcome back. We are looking at the economic survey table today in Parliament and discussing what it foretells. Paranjoy, Biraj made some very significant points on social sector front and all that. Just carrying forward the agriculture thing, some of the solutions which are being agriculture growth is bad and it needs to be improved. What are the solutions which they're talking about? Market to play a role, and it says that private investment in infrastructure, FDI in retail, these are the things which will revive agriculture growth. Do you think these are the solutions?
I don't think these are the solutions. I think one of the reasons why there's been a slight revival in agricultural production in the last 10 years or so is because of growing investment and public investment in agriculture. Unless that happens, it's not going to happen. We're not going to see agriculture grow. Secondly, when Dr. Raghuram Rajan was asked this question during the press briefing he had, he himself acknowledged that if there are going to be subsidies, food subsidy should get top priority. At the same time, he says we need to cut out flab from government expenditure. The problem is, in cutting out flab, are you also going to cut out the muscle? So, I asked him a very specific question that across the world, Which country is cutting down its deficit? Okay, it's one thing to say they want to cut down the deficit. You know, you're also having a situation where, yes, I acknowledge as a percentage of our GDP, our fiscal deficit is higher than that in many other countries, including the BRICS countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, etc. But the question is, when you have a great recession happening, when you have an economic slowdown happening, is this the time to become austere again? This is a debate that's happening all over the world.
Austere as far as the subsidies are concerned?
Austere on subsidies, austere in terms of government expenditure. It's all very fine to say, yes, we must cut out, you know, excessive flab. It's all very fine to say, yes, we must ensure that subsidies reach the intended beneficiaries. But that that means better governance, you know, reduction of corruption, and so on and so forth.
And they're depending on the Aadhaar card and, you know, direct.
And my fear is in cutting this so-called excess expenditure, the excess flab or the excess fat from government, you might end up also cutting out some of the muscle.
Mohan,
Very simple.
I'm sure you have a different point of view than he has.
60% of agriculture in India is rain-fed.
Rain-fed.
So people who are in rain-fed zones, they don't get the benefit of subsidized power, subsidized fertilizer and procurement. So they are out of it. Whatever comes in the form of subsidies to the people in the irrigated area, the large farmers get the bulk of it. The guys who don't deserve it, who need it least, they get the benefits of power because they are the guys with motors, they are the guys who buy fertilizer.
And they're the ones who are drawing out the power.
Driving out power, drawing out the water. They're not paying for the water, getting there next to the canals, below the dams and tanks, you know, so they're drawing all the water, getting all the benefits. So the small farmer, you know, the average Indian farmer today has, you know, 0.6 hectare.
An average.
Sector. Yeah. Now, they don't get anything. Now, bulk of our money in agriculture goes off in the form of subsidies. There is no capital expenditure. Government has moved out of the business of creating irrigation potential, new...
so now what is the point?
The point is that you have to move off subsidies and get into capital expenditure. There's a difference in curbing spending, but there's a difference in shifting how you spend the money.
Okay. Pravin Jha, Mohan Guruswamy has a, you know, says that cut subsidies, move to capital expenditure.
No, I think subsidies need to be managed better. Cutting subsidies is not the answer as far as I see it, but certainly the need for capital expenditure is something which is a crying need. Very little has been done for quite some time in that area. And for that, you know, I think we should not be concentrating so much on the expenditure side as on the resource mobilization side.
Right.
India has one of the lowest tax GDP ratios in the world. We need to find ways of raising resources if we want to address some of these really very, very basic issues. Because by tinkering with the expenditure, you know, sort of robbing Paul to pay Peter is not going to solve our problems in any manner.
Right.
So I think, you know, the focus has to be elsewhere. Better subsidy management, I completely agree with Dr. Mohan Guruswamy, but cutting subsidies, you know, without really preparing the ground for it and thinking about it in a comprehensive fashion is only going to hurt agriculture further.
Right.
And, you know...
Okay, I think we have lost the link with Pravin Jha. Biraj,
Yeah, for a minute.
Biraj, you're there?
I'm there,
Yes,
Girish.
yes, Biraj.
No, Girish, I'm not so worried about rationalizing subsidies, because another perspective to look at it is also that if you have a policy that gives a perverse incentive for fertilizer use, the more land you have, more subsidy you get, it's not environmentally sustainable either. So I don't think that anyone is making a case not for rationalizing subsidies.
Right.
But I'm worried at the direction that this is taking, because as Paranjoy rightly said, look at the experience of the UK in the last 2 years, the austerity, the cuts, and despite everything, they are facing a triple dip recession. They've had their credit rating downgraded from AAA, which has sent the country into a national shock. I mean, that is the path we are headed for if we follow that model, number one. Secondly, I think what the government is doing is a very clever tinkering of subsidies, or at least attempting to. Let me give you the example of the health sector.
Right.
Having failed in their attempts to privatize the health sector in the 12th plan document, what they are most likely to do is to strangulate the public sector. You will encourage the private sector by killing the NRHM, by not giving them adequate budgetary support in the coming budget tomorrow. So we go back to the 90s where the fact
Biraj,
that you
Biraj-
don't have public expenditure is going to lead to higher
Biraj,
private sector expenditure.
Biraj, we will wait for we have just a few hours to go before we will see whether your prediction on this front is going to come true. But let me come to Mohan Guruswamy. Mohan, the investments they're talking. There's a lot of talk about increasing investments and increasing savings also. You think where is what kind of things
Well,
do you envisage Chidambaram going to
I
come up
agree
with?
with Dr. Jha about taxes. We need to widen the tax base,
Exactly.
raise more money on taxes.
Yes.
Lots of people get away without paying enough taxes. And lots of people don't pay taxes at all. So we've got to raise the taxes on the rich particularly. I've got no problems with that. I think we've got to cut off undeserved subsidies.
Right.
I think people who get subsidies on LPG, 80% of the LPG is used by the middle class and upper class. Okay, they don't deserve it.
Anyway,
Okay.
it's already started.
But it's rolled back again.
It's rolled back.
Typically. Okay, so you need to tackle those things. And you put, because every rupee you give as subsidy comes at the cost of somebody who's outside the system.
Okay, I mean,
Okay.
Mohan, your point is well taken, but the issue of investments.
Now,
Where are the
is
investments going to come from?
investment money? If you reduce some of these things, that money is available for investment. Okay.
In the economic survey,
Sorry, Paranjoy, first let me go to Pravin. Pravin has to leave. Yes, Pravin.
Yes,
Pravin,
sir.
as far as investments are concerned.
Right. No, that is where I said with our current expenditure. In any case, let us remember that close to 90+% of expenditure that we'll see in budget tomorrow
Yes.
are committed expenditures.
Absolutely.
Interest rates, salaries, etc., and there's
94%.
nothing that we can do with all that. So in the remaining 7 to 8% or something like that, what are we going to do? So the real issue is that of raising resources. If we
Right.
want to increase investments, that is where we need to sort of focus our attention at the current juncture.
Okay.
And with that,
Girish, I also
yes.
think
1 second, Biraj. Let Pravin finish.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that, in terms of for instance, let me just give you one particular example. Suppose we increase the tax rate on those who have an income of, let's say, more than 20 lakhs.
Right.
From 30% to 40%, immediately we can mobilize something like 31,000 crores. And if we give, let's say, this exemption, this income tax exemption, if we increase that by another 50,000 or so, we are actually going to lose only about 14,000 crores.
Right.
But just think of, what kind of benefit in terms of the population at the lower end is going to have. So simply thinking about these things, my sense is that there is a lot that can be done, apart from improving the overall administration of taxation, towards which I think we have done very little.
Okay, Pravin. Yes, Biraj, quickly, and then I want
Girish,
to come
just
to
a
Paranjoy.
quick point.
Yes.
When we are talking about cutting subsidies, I would like to add my feeble voice to the fact that we must also about cutting the revenue foregone. It seems perfectly acceptable today to subsidize the corporate sector. We are subsidizing them to an extent of more than 5 lakh crores.
Absolutely.
80% of government's revenue is foregone today. Now, some of these, I agree, can be incentive. They're indirect. They're not directing. They're not affecting a particular segment. But if you look at just for gold, for instance, you're foregoing 50,000 crores
No,
for
there is a talk.
jewelry sector.
There is a mention in the survey about reducing the gold imports and things like that.
let me talk about that
Yes,
a little
yes.
bit.
Paranjoy.
This is the second biggest item of import that we have after oil. It's gold.
Yes.
In the recent past, every year, like $50-60 billion worth of.
69 billion.
That's correct. So now this is ridiculous. Why? Why are people investing in gold? They're investing in gold because other avenues of investment have become so uncertain. And that's why a huge amount of household savings are going into this unproductive way. Now, you don't have, as the government has been claiming, you don't have competing avenues of investment which will protect people against inflation and give a safe kind of avenue for keeping your savings. So this is where the government has not succeeded. What you've seen is that inflation, and we have hardly talked about inflation, and in food inflation in particular, has sharply eroded the real incomes, not just of the poor, but the middle classes, as a result of which the savings rate has come down fairly dramatically over the last years. I mean, about 3 or 4 percentage points. It's come down below 30%, which is a matter of concern, because what is happening is you've entered into a vicious cycle. Inflation, lower savings, lower savings, lower investment, lower growth. And that's the unfortunate part of the story as far as the
Mohan,
Indian economy is concerned.
Tough job for Chidambaram tomorrow?
Very tough. The election year also.
Yes.
The pools of populism. The pools, there's always a difficult choice. You got to either decide that that you got to work in the interest of the party, or decide you work in the interest of the country.
You
And,
think Biraj was pointing out about two things. One about Pravin also was
Foregone
pointing out.
taxes, I'm fully
One about
with-
higher taxes to the people who are earning more.
Earning
You
more.
think Chidambaram will be able to bite that bullet?
I don't think he'll do it.
Okay.
Because I think he's got too much of a class bias to do that. And the government's true constituency is the CII and the FICCI. They're always looking at them. They are the guys they consult and talk to.
Girish,
Okay?
only 3% of the population of this country is paying income tax.
Income tax.
Yeah.
So widening the tax base.
Widening the base is important.
Yes.
There are lots of people. I therefore don't agree that you raise the exemption rate. I think get more people, and I think you got to look at small scale industries. There are lots of big companies who organize themselves as small scale industries, to circumvent the excise duty.
Right.
So you got to get everybody into the habit of paying taxes.
Okay.
No exemptions. there.
Biraj, last words to social sector spending. Manrega, all this. Your pet project, right to food, the food security thing. You think this year we will see that happening?
I think the government is left with no choice but to pass the bill. And
But where are they? But where are they going to get the money from? The same debate will happen whether we are going to spend on that or raise investment. This investment versus subsidies debate will start all over again on that.
But Girish, the bill that has been passed on to the law ministry now, incorporating the standing committee's comments, they require an additional investment of only 22,000 crores a year.
Okay.
I don't think government will find that hard to mop up. The question is is such a whittled down bill really the need of the hour, or should we be more expansive?
That's a separate discussion on its own. Anyway, we have just a few hours before knowing what the finance minister will come up with. We will wait and watch. But the economic survey, as we discussed today, is shows that the situation is pretty gloomy. How he will be able to tackle this gloom and create hope in this country, we'll wait and watch. Thanks to all my guests, Mohan, Guruswamy, Paranjoy, Guha, Thakurta, Dr. Pravin and Biraj Patnaik. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture. Meanwhile, tomorrow, the whole day, you can see live discussions on Rajya Sabha TV on the budget. Thanks to all of you.